In round 10 of the World Chess Olympiad, it's the top match, Uzbekistan against China. In this video, we're going to have a look at the crucial game played at board 1. Nodibek Abdusattorov, one of the superstars in modern chess, currently ranked number 6 in the world. He's playing with the white pieces against the reigning world champion Ding Liren. And we all know that Ding is having a very difficult year. Since he has become world champion, he is having a very rough time, losing many games. And in fact, the last game, single chess game, he managed to win. It goes back to 27th of January at the Tata Steel chess tournament in Wijk aan Zee, when he defeated Max Warmerdam. Well, that's a long time ago. It's almost 8 months a world champion didn't win a single game. That is quite remarkable. But in this video, we're going to see if Ding is able to put his opponent Abdusattorov under pressure. It's a very instructive game, and the good thing for Ding is that Abdusattorov is a very energetic player. He's always trying to play for a win, and that also gives chances to the opponent. Well, if you do like my videos from this Olympiad, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for all the support. And here we go. Abdusattorov starts the game with the move 1d4. Knight f6, knight f3, d5. And here, kind of a small surprise as Abdusattorov goes for e3. It's a solid move, and well, it's the so-called collie system. Black plays the principled move c5, and there are different ways of playing. Usually when you go for the collie setup, you go for moves like c3 or b3 with the idea to go bishop b2. The modern way of playing this line is to capture the pawn on c5, which is sort of anti-positional, to give up your central pawn too easily. As after the move e6, Black is trying to regain the pawn, completing his development at the same time. But White's plan is here to stick to the pawn with the move b4. And Black is going to challenge that pawn chain with the move a5. White goes for the move c3. Pawn takes b4, c takes b4, undoubling the pawns. But now there is this move b6, putting pressure against the pawn on c5. If that pawn from c5 is going to move, the black bishop is ready to take on b4 with check. So White goes here for this move. Bishop b5 check, bishop d7, bishop takes the bishop, Black takes back with the knight. And now, interesting moment, as you can see, White is no longer able to hold on to the pawn on c5. He goes for this idea with a4. Interesting idea. After pawn takes c5, White's plan is to advance the pawn to b5. So all of a sudden, White does have two connected passed pawns. Although it should be said that at this point, the subsequent squares on a5 and b6, they're pretty well covered by Black. So it's pretty difficult to push these pawns even further. In Black's favor, there's this pawn center on c5 and d5. Looks pretty nice. And well, this line has become quite popular since the Women's World Championship match last year between two Chinese players, Zhu Wenjun and Tingji Li. And well, in that game, Queen c7 was played, but obviously Ding is also pretty up to date on this line. He goes for bishop d6, interesting move. So bishop is well placed here, bishop to b2. And now, also very interesting idea, which is something probably a human player would not come up himself with. But here g5 is played, super aggressive move, as all of a sudden Black is launching an initiative by pushing the pawn to g5 with the aim to go to g4 to force the knight from f3 to go to an inferior square. One of the main points, of course, is that if you do take on g5 the pawn, there is a rook g8, and with an attack against the knight on g5, very soon the pawn on g2 is going to be lost as well. So taking on g5 is not recommended, but there are a lot of other possibilities. In the game, White played here this move, g3. Looks kind of a strange move, weakening the light squares on the king side. And Black continues with the move g4, attacking the knight. But the main plan of White's last move is to place the knight safely on h4, as it is supported by the pawn on g3. But the knight does look offside. It's not looking great at all. Not clear where the knight is going next. And I really like Black's next move, bishop e5. I think it's a very good move to intend trading off white's most active piece. This bishop on the long diagonal can otherwise cause a lot of problems. And well, I think black is in good shape, as you understand. But if white would simply, let's say, take on e5 and then go for castling kingside, it's still a pretty sharp game. It's also the question what black is going to do with his king. Is he going to castle kingside at some point or not, having advanced the pawn already quite far? But anyway, I think here Abdusattorov is relaxing too much. He goes for the move queen c2 instead of taking the bishop on e5, and now because of that move you're protecting the bishop, but now black does have the chance to insert this very annoying check on a5, making it very difficult for white to castle anytime soon. Because for instance, if you do block that check by going knight e2, the knight will come into e4, putting more pressure against the knight on d2. There's this very annoying pin, and black is actually much better in this case. Not winning directly, but I don't see a convenient way for white to untangle. So white doesn't want to create these problems for himself by letting the king stay in the center, and decides here to go king f1. And the king is probably on its way to g2, so that later the rook from h1 can join play. The rooks can be connected soon, but it's time consuming. That's something you rather not do yourself as white. Bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and now queen b4. Very interesting idea. So Ding is offering the exchange of queens, and it's actually quite difficult to avoid it. I mean, there are always potential problems regarding the pawn on a4, as the file for the rook has been opened. Knight can always come to b6, so white does accept the exchange of queens here. Queen takes queen, pawn takes back. And here, black also all of a sudden does have a passed pawn. Knight e2, the knight is controlling the b3 square. But now you think it's kind of a slower game. Queens are off the board, but it's in fact razor sharp. And the question is, which pawns are stronger than the others? And also, how about that knight on h4, the king on f1, the rook on h1, which is not doing much yet. So there are different ways of playing here for black. I do like this plan of knight c5 to attack the pawn on a4, and if you do advance it, you can play king d7 with the idea to get the rook over to b8. And these pawns, they are under threat, and because of that lack of coordination, I think white is in some sort of a trouble. But in the game, Ding went for king e7. And instead of moving the king somewhere, let's say to g2, he tried here h3, which is kind of interesting as you try to find an alternative way to activate a rook on the h-file. Second idea is that after pawn takes h3, the knight comes back to f3. And then, well, there are better chances here for white to get a grip on the queen side. And who knows, once you stabilize the situation, these pawns, they can become pretty good as well. So what happened in the game? Well, there was this move knight c5, attacking the pawn on a4. Pawn takes g4. And well, black may just take back, of course. Also, the pawn on a4 is hanging. An alternative plan here is to push the passed pawn as quickly as you can, so that you can go b2, hit the rook, and then later take with a knight on a4, so that the knight supports that pawn on b2. I think playing for the initiative is also about setting your own priority list, and I think by mobilizing your main asset, you make it very difficult for white to become active. Well, anyway, rook takes pawn was played, rook takes rook, knight takes rook. And here the move g5, attacking that knight on f6. And the knight comes to e4, attacking the knight on d2. Once again, if you take on e4, the pawn comes back to e4. And look at this knight, it's sort of stranded. That's something you don't really want. The knight cannot come to f3 anymore. So rather than taking, white played here the move knight h to f3, protecting the knight on d2. And here, knight a c5. Logical move. The knight at the side of the board is not doing much. And here, from c5, it does support the march of the b pawn. White goes for king g2. And here indeed b3. Pawn looks pretty good. But what would you do here as white? Well, when I'm looking at the position and I see that I gotta deal with this passed pawn, I would be scared. Abdusattorov is not scared, of course. But I think he makes a wrong assessment, as the safest way of playing here is to wrap up that pawn with the move rook b1 here. So you have ideas to take on b3. If you take on d2, you take back, rook b8, rook is attacking the pawn on b5. You can go for this line, knight takes b3, rook takes b5, pinning the knight on b3. But after knight e2, well, all the pieces are coming off the board, and this looks like a very drawish knight endgame. But as I said, Abdusattorov is not afraid. He is trying to play for more. He goes here for this idea b6. I thought this very remarkable idea because, frankly speaking, I don't see what that b pawn is going to do. It's well controlled by the knight. Also, the rook is covering the back rank pretty well. But I assume his idea was that after, let's say, something like rook b8, he wants to give up the knight on b3, and after taking it back, go for rook takes h7, and with ideas like g6 and knight e5, there's sufficient counterplay to maintain the balance. Well, I guess that was his idea. However, Ding doesn't have to go for rook b8 here. Why would you do that? Well, knight takes d2 is a much better move here. One pair of knights comes off the board, and now the pawn moves forward to b2, and how is white ever going to get rid of that b pawn? Because, for instance, if you play here rook b1 with the idea to take it, knight a4 is a very difficult move to meet. And then, well, there's rook b8, you win the pawn on b6. This is a huge extra pawn, and it's all of a sudden game over. So instead of playing the move rook b1, white tried here the move f3. And that's also kind of a quite remarkable decision, I would say. But white is sort of waiting for black to move the rook somewhere, so that later he can take on h7. Well, anyway, critical moment. Also, one of the key ideas with f3 is that you prevent knight e4 ideas anytime soon. But as I said, this is a critical moment. You may pause the video here for a while and try to come up with the winning plan for black, as black needs to activate the rook, in fact. But how are you going to do that? Well, I can show you various lines, but the key idea is to put the rook not on the b file, but on the c file. You want to get entrance with the rook on the second rank. And now, for instance, the key plan is, after, let's say, giving up the pawn on h7, the knight goes back to d7. And in chess, especially in endgames, when it's razor sharp, it's all about trying to find a good balance between active pieces who are going on a hunt and pieces who are doing the defensive task. Here the knight is defending the b pawn, threatening to take it, also controlling the b8 square. But rook c2 is coming next. Even if you go g6, there's rook c2, you're about to take the knight on d2 with check, after which the b pawn will be promoted. So that is the winning idea, very instructive idea. I mean, it's very logical, in fact, to think, okay, let's play it simple, rook b8, rook takes b6, but it's kind of slow. The rook is much more actively placed on c2 to undermine that knight on d2. Well, anyway, knight a4 was played, which also seems sensible, as you're defending the pawn, but the pawn is not under threat, so that was not needed at all. And here Abdusattorov is just in time to restore the balance with a very impressive maneuver, as he goes for rook h4, attacking the knight. The knight takes the pawn on b6, rook to b4, and the black is no longer better here. The knight is under threat, the knight got a move, and then the pawn on b2 can be eliminated. Black played h6 to swap the pawn on g5, pawn takes, rook takes. Now it's a rook and knight endgame with 3 pawns each. After rook b7, e5, f4. I mean, more pawns will come off the board, but here Ding played the move rook b6 over the draw, as the exchange of rooks cannot be avoided any longer. If white does that, the rook will come to b2 and pick up the knight. So let's say after rook takes, rook, knight takes, the endgame is very equal. Let's say if you take on e5, king e6, knight f3, knight c4, Black is going to regain the pawn anyway. So here, very exciting game. And although Ding Liren once again didn't manage to win a game, I think he can still be quite satisfied with the level of play against a super sharp and ambitious player like Abdusattorov. He showed his class, and that's good for his level of confidence going into the match, the World Championship match in about 2 months from now. So, well, let me know what you think of this game. And when is Ding Liren, the reigning world champion, going to win finally a chess game again? I will keep you posted here on the channel. Anyway, thanks for all your support. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you soon again.